Welcome to Racing News. In the show this week, world-renowned race caller Terry Spargo recently flew into South Africa for a brief visit. This vastly experienced, self-effacing man showed that even he could get it wrong at times. But first, with the month of August comes the celebration of our champions around the country. And none more so than at our national awards at Emperor's Palace this past week. We catch up with those whose remarkable achievements have gone down in the record books in our sport of horse racing. Having first won the South African Trainers title 4 years ago, Justin Snaith's peach of a season saw him clinch the title for a second time. Excluding restricted races, Snaith Racing posted total stakes of 26,790,000 rand, 6 million ahead of Sean Tarry's yard and a further 4 million ahead of Mike de Kock. Snaith won 7 Grade 1s during a season which was peppered with records. On Saturday the 27th of January this year, the stable not only won 3 Grade 1s on the day, but O Susanna became the first 3-year-old filly in over 100 years to win the Met. Whilst Terence Millard stamped the Rothmans July as his own in previous years, having landed the July trifecta twice, Snaith yet again set a new standard in 2018 by recording the trifecta as well as 5th place. Justin, as a horseman, I see that you are always in the yard. You say that your yard is your happy place and you're there morning and evenings. Does this go a long way to contributing to the success that you've had?
It's the only way, to be honest. Years ago, I had the fortunate moment of talking and speaking to Terence Millard. I was very lucky that I sort of came along at the right time where guys were about to retire, but at the same time I could see how they used to operate. Nowadays, those young guys in the industry will never see Terence Millard in his heyday. I was fortunate in that I had those opportunities, and guys like Tony Millard that left the country, and I was very fortunate, just right time, right place. Sadly, the horsemanship in South African racing has left the building, from jockeys. If you ask a jockey to saddle a horse, I don't think they would know even how to do it. And also our young people in the industry now that are starting to get going, none of them have got overseas experience in working for top trainers around the world, which I think is a very sad reality and where we're going. I cherish those experiences and those moments so that I could learn to be a horseman, and obviously it's what my father was about. We're always looking for advantages, and I think that in that those things give me an advantage over some of the other guys. You know, that's all we look for, is that type of experience, and I think it's helped me a lot. When I spoke to Terence Millard, he said, my son, you need to decide what you're going to do in life. If you're going to be a trainer, then you've got to give up everything else in a way. I took that moment, listened to him. I think I fulfilled what I wanted to be known for as a trainer, which is a horseman first.
Yeah, well, I think that's what stands out noticeably to everybody. Now, I get the feeling that despite your success, you constantly look to raise the bar. Would that be fair to say?
Without a doubt. It's everything I'm about. I started last year in trying to raise the game, raise the bar, but not just in racing, but my setup, our setup, Snaith Racing's headquarters here in Cape Town. I just thought that the racing has gone a bit quiet in Cape Town. The facilities are not what they should be. If you look at Milnerton and Philippi, there's just the financial, Phumelela pretty much ran us on a shoestring budget.
Yeah.
And for me, that was disappointing. So I decided to put on my gumboots and get involved in upgrading our training facility on our farm in Cape Town. And I put a lot of things in place and came back now after the Natal season. I'm just so over the moon to be proud of what I think is a haven for racehorses. And I do believe in Cape Town. It is the best place to raise a young horse in South Africa, make no mistake.
Yes.
It's second, there's nothing that's second to it. The facilities where our grass, the climate and stuff like that, and looking after a young horse, getting it to a Group 1 level, I think this is the right place. And as I said, I've worked, I cut hands, pulled muscles in doing it myself with my team, getting what I think is a beautiful facility for racehorse.
Now, your whole family is involved with you in Snaith Racing, and you present a united front. Tell me, do you all get along all of the time?
Look, it's very hard to always get along. We're not always polite to each other because in my family, every one of them could train. If my brother decided to take out his trainer's license, he'd probably beat me on the trainer's log, and vice versa, and same with my father. So everyone is capable, but my name's there. We wanted to make it Snaith Racing, but the Jockey Club wouldn't allow it because someone's got to take the brunt when things go wrong. So we kept it with my name there, but that's just for show. We sometimes have to go to a vote, so it's a three-way vote. It's whatever's best for the business and the family and our horses. So our team is very strong. Behind the scenes this season, gained some of the best assistants in the country, and we've got a hell of a setup for the new season. And then obviously my clients. I think if any trainer dreamed of a clientele at the moment, they'd be dreaming what the clients I have at the moment, which is why we're at the top of the log, make no mistake.
Well, it's always a pleasure to deal with any one of your team.
Great, no, thank you. And, just proud to be from South Africa. I was in Goodwood, and I was as proud as ever to say where I'm from, and very happy to be training here, and no intention of training elsewhere, and they're just very happy and proud to be part of South African racing.
At just 20, Lyle Hewitson became the first jockey since the legendary Gerald Turner to win the national title while still an apprentice. Success and breaking records seem to be synonymous with Lyle from the time he rode his first race as a licensed apprentice less than 2.5 years ago. His achievements have been remarkable.
I attribute my success to being very dedicated and hardworking, and really having a passion for the game and for horses. I think a combination of that is vital in order to succeed, and then opportunities will come your way, because of course without opportunities the success is not possible. But if you are humble, if you're dedicated, and if you're passionate about the sport and the horses, then those opportunities will come and the success will follow. Yes, this motto would be my approach to my career and probably my lifestyle too. I think you have to have a positive outlook on things, be optimistic at all times, and if you work hard and you prepare and you're dedicated, then the luck will come your way, because you've created your own luck. As Gary Player said, the more I practice, the luckier I get, and I think that follows on from that sort of saying. That is the plan. I do hope Mr. Terry and I can build on our relationship from here and continue our success together. So when I come back, I'll be working hard, and hopefully the opportunities with him come again and the success follows. It's really hard to say for now what my next step is. I'm going to go out to ride winners, to pull off features, and we'll take it as it comes. Whatever opportunities follow, I'll have to look at them closely and decide what to do. If I had to give advice to other apprentices, I think it would be just to work really hard and never give up. The main thing also to be not to be intimidated by senior jockeys. Have the confidence in yourself and in your own ability. Remain humble and be dedicated to the trade.
Oh Susanna was only the second filly in 7 years to be bestowed the title of Horse of the Year. One has to go back to the 2010 and 11 season when fellow Australian-bred filly Igugu took the crown. Since then, the accolade has twice gone to Variety Club, then Legislate, Futura and twice to Legal Eagle. But this year saw the Drockenstein stud owned and bred daughter of Street Cry, out of the US winning mare Sharp Susan, awarded the highest honor of all. Oh Susanna was the only treble Grade 1 winner last season, having landed the Paddock Stakes, Sunmet and Wool-Lavington 2000. She also scored a treble of champion titles on the evening, champion 3-year-old filly, champion middle distance, and finally Horse of the Year.
Now, you've trained some fine horses in your career already. How does Oh Susanna rate?
The thing about her, which has always been from the beginning, is where's the limit with her? I haven't found the limit yet. Where does she finish up? Very interesting. Got all the potential, and from the first time I started training her, it was always, wow, this has got potential, but how good? And that we'll see in the season. She's got to go out there. She's got to prove how good she actually is, and quite honestly, the only way you find out is on the racetrack.
Yes, when will we see her out again, Justin?
She's really back into training, which is very early for me, but because she only had one start in the last 8 months, so I'm taking over now, and we'll just plan it carefully. Obviously, this year Longmoron's Queen's Plate and the Sunmet are the main aims. So everything in this season will revolve around those 2 days. Everything. Yeah, we're looking forward to what will be an amazing summer. Hopefully the marketing guys wake up, get their act together. Cape Town is a stunning place. That's where we need to do our marketing, that people are coming out here for 2 weeks holidays and stuff in the stunning summer, and we need to go knock on those doors and make sure those people come to racing, because it's a great way to spend an afternoon.
International race caller and previous Voice of Dubai, Terry Spargo, was recently invited to South Africa by Pro Sport International. For 17 years, Terry called every World Cup in an annual program that included more than 50 race meetings a year across the UAE. But his career started long before. He was linked to the launch of the Magic Millions phenomenon, calling snippets to win the inaugural running of the race in 1987, and remained race caller up until 1993.
Snippets is going, great guns, 100 to go, he's got them stitched, and Snippets is driving away in the run of the post, will win easily. Snippets first, Prince Anton Fluent got second, and it's tight for third between I'm Ready and...
After then completing a stint in Hong Kong, he returned to Australia for a couple of years before moving to Dubai. We caught up with him on his trip to Greyville. Do you have any standout moments in your career where a particular win or a race has really touched you?
Well, I can remember calling my first Dubai World Cup, won by Captain Steve. I was particularly nervous that night. I can remember 2004 when Pleasantly Perfect and Medaglia d'Oro reprised their clash in the Breeders' Cup the previous November. They ran first and second again. That's one that sticks out with me. I can remember going way back, calling the first ever Magic Millions on the Gold Coast back in 1986 when Snippets, trained by Sally Rogers and ridden by PB Philip Smith, won the first ever Magic Millions. So I was lucky enough to do that, and there's been a plethora of a lot of races I've been lucky enough to do, both in the galloping world and back in the early Australian days before I first went overseas harness racing. I was lucky enough to do quite a few Inter-Dominions, the championship between Australia and New Zealand.
Do different countries have different styles of race calling?
Each country has a different technique. Some, like Australia, go a lot faster. The Americans can go fast or slow, depending on what part of the country they're in. The British take a more laid-back style. South Africa is similar to Australia. There's similarities, but there's differences.
Do you have any mannerisms or idiosyncrasies just before those gates open to get you in the zone to call?
If I do, they're probably automatic now, because I've been doing it for some little time, and they are probably automatic. I try and get them in my head, have them in my head before they're walking into the gates, and then thinking about making sure I have them, what's where, and then perhaps just a little blank until the gates open, so that you don't go into it with a presupposed notion.
Has the button, gates fly, they're racing in the Dubai World Cup.
And you're saying the gates fly?
Yeah, that went back I think I first introduced that when I was calling at the Gold Coast in the 1970s. Quite a few commentators in those days used to say things like gates fly back or gates fly open. And just one day I don't know, young and brash I suppose as I was then, I shortened it to gates fly, tended to use it a bit, people commented on it, and it became my catch cry. I find now I don't use it as much as I used to.
As a young race caller, how do you learn to manage some of that tension and nervous energy?
Practice, I think. Practice, practice, practice. I can remember when I first started, and from what I know, I think many of us are the same. You tend to hit the crescendo as soon as the gates open. That's the first thing you have to teach yourself, is save the finish for the finish, because you've got a long way to go. But to repeat, I just found as much practice as I could get on any of the codes, any of the 3 codes. I crammed in as much practice as I could. Every time I had an opportunity to get somewhere with a pair of binoculars and a tape recorder, I practiced.
What are some of the challenges that you've encountered in race calling?
Well, when you go to different places, sometimes you have tracks that are easy to call at and tracks that are difficult to call at because of the structure of the track or something that may be on the infield. I can remember the Dubai World Cup at Nad Al Sheba, where I started before Maidan was built. They used to erect all of these hospitality marquees in the middle of the racecourse, and they're only there one day a year, but they just created a block to the view that wasn't there for the rest of the season. So you'd arrive on World Cup Day and all of a sudden was, oh, you can't see as well as you could before. And then eventually we shifted, thankfully. They built more marquees and eventually realised we couldn't see it all, so we shifted up a floor higher. And then when Maidan was built, we were up about 6 floors, 7 floors, so you virtually could see everything over the top of the big stand and the whole lot. You run into trouble at some racecourses where they go uphill, down dale, behind trees, behind golf club houses at a certain track where we are now, which I'm looking forward to with trepidation. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, different tracks have different characteristics.
Whilst trees may not be considered hazards or difficult obstacles for golfers, and the well-supported 19th hole in the clubhouse most certainly not, they can be to race callers when obstructing line of sight. Terry, do you stand or sit when you race call?
I stand. Some commentators do sit if the track and the facilities make it available. But when I was a kid, when I first started, all of the broadcast boxes that were available to practice in were, for want of a better term, standing boxes. And when I really got going and had to start at some of the bush tracks, that was all you could do, was stand up.
Now tell me, do you prefer calling races on turf or synthetic surfaces?
I was brought up on turf. In Australia there was very, very little synthetic racing. There was a famous racetrack in Brisbane, Albion Park, where they still have the harness racing, but at one stage it was a harness racing and galloping track. It was only 6 furlongs around, 1,200 metres around, so it was the only real non-turf. So I was brought up on turf, so to be fair I'd have to say I prefer turf.
Do you prefer calling staying races or sprints?
I think staying races give you more of a chance to paint the picture early on, but in the end I guess the most important part of the race is the stretch call, for want of a better term, and they're all the same, so basically the same. But if you ask me, if someone said, well, you can pick a 6 furlong sprint or a 10 furlong middle distance race, 1,200 metres, I'm showing my age, aren't I? 1,200 metres or 2,000 metres, I'd probably pick the 2,000 metres.
As a race caller, do you have the potential to actually stir the crowd and get them going when the horses come into the straight?
I don't really know. I think you can, but whether or not you do, it's a bit hard to tell, because by the time they're turning for home, you're probably concentrating particularly hard, and unless it's a runaway, breakaway leader, you're probably not aware of what's going on. I can recall one time I did know what was going on when Electrocutionist won the World Cup at Nad Al Sheba. I think it was about the second last or third last in Adel Sheba, and you may remember he started favourite. He drew the number 1 gate, which was no good at all from the 2,000 metre start. Got buried on the fence, was doing nothing. They got to the 1,000 metres mark, and Frankie pulled him off the rail. And Brass Hat, who was the main American challenger at the time, hit the front, and Electrocutionists went out after him. And I think I can remember saying something in the call like they were pulling the joint down. They were screaming from the rafters as Frankie drove him into the lead. So that's one I do remember. In fact, I could hardly hear myself think. Yeah, the spot then, which was the newest spot in Adel Sheba, was quite out in the open and quite open. So you could hear noise and you could hardly hear yourself. Well, I could hardly hear myself think the last 200 metres or so.
Do you prefer reading a race card to a novel?
No, I probably would spend more time with my book, with my head buried in a novel than I would with a race card. Yeah, I'm a ferocious reader and probably spend more time with my head buried in a book than I should.
At 62, Terry will still be reading his race cards as Radio TAB and the Gold Coast Turf Club have reappointed him in a full-time commentary position, one he left over 25 years ago. Life may be coming full circle for Terry Spargo, but he has still more milestones to achieve. As a lifelong fan of horse racing, his wish is to have a crack at the Melbourne Cup. We look forward to that, and all of us in South Africa wish him well. That's it for this episode of Racing News. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at Racing News TV Show. The page recently saw support reach 1,000 followers and counting. Thank you, and to the many of you who participated in our recent promotion. Vishal Ramdat, Gabriel Chetty, Lucky Satole, Donovan Naidu, Sandile Tsele, and Taron Govender. Your personalized Racing News caps will be on their way to you shortly. We'll see you all again in a fortnight on Sunday, the 2nd of September. Until then, we wish you all profitable racing. The Racing News Show and previous screenings are available online at www.goldcircle.co.za. Click on the YouTube icon, go to playlists, and click on Racing News to access all shows to date.